One of the things that I've experienced um, as a musician in my time is the fact that this chord often gets explained in the most convoluted of ways. It's never explained in a way that I think is very clear, and it actually took a particular book and a particular person to help me understand it from what I think it actually really is. And most theory textbooks don't approach it the way that I do, which is harmonic. They don't think of it as a harmonic structure. They think of it as simply a voice leading structure. Yes, all harmony in Western music evolved out of essentially voice leading procedure. But when we think about it in terms of harmonic structure, it makes a lot more sense. And composers thought that way too. And I'm a composer, so I tend to think that way. So yeah, what the heck is it? My head's in the way. But yes, the reason why it's called an augmented sixth chord, I understood that from the beginning, is because it contains an augmented sixth. What I was first introduced to was this. So if you can see, this is a little chart here. There are so many convolutions and regulations in these different sort of nationalities that actually have nothing to do with anything, French, German, or Italian, or Brazilian or Swiss. I've heard of the Swiss one, and there's God knows how many other flavors there are. But here we are, scale degrees, right? And it's like, well, we've got things like sharp fours and flat sixes and twos and ones, and some have, this and some have that. Well, wait a minute, what is all of this stuff? Isn't like the chord sounds kind of the same depending on the structure? Like, isn't there an easier way to parse this? Well, in truth, actually, there is. And so this was the moment of revelation for me, actually. So this gentleman way over on, I guess would be the left-hand side of your screen, is a gentleman by the name of Joe Maneri. And then the slice in the middle is the book that we used in our 18th and 19th century harmonic practice class at New England Conservatory of Music. So when I was 19 years old, I took 18th and 19th century harmonic practice, and I took it with this gentleman here, 1 year, 1 and 2. And we used the Schoenberg theory of harmony. That was our text, essentially. When I learned the augmented sixth chord with Joe through Schoenberg's lensing, it made a whole lot of sense to me. Okay, so what, pray tell, is that? It's an altered dominant. So if you think about a 5 of 5, right? And again, this is probably not new to most of you, but it's not something that music theory textbooks present. Usually they present it in some convoluted way with all these scale degrees, and you got to do this and do that. Well, no, it's just a 5 of 5 with a flat 5. It's a flat 5 dominant. In most cases, because the augmented sixth chord is functioning in tonal music as a predominant chord, it sets up the dominant. In the diagram here is the French augmented sixth chord, which is the way I like to think of it is it's the most pure form of the augmented sixth chord, because it is literally the 5 of 5 with a flat 5. In other words, a dominant 7 flat 5. What inversion it is actually not that important. A lot of times the books will go through, they'll actually talk about inversions of chords. They'll talk about the augmented 4-2 or some ridiculous stuff like this. That doesn't matter. It's just this. Whether it's in one configuration or the other doesn't matter at all. And this made a lot of sense to me. And why this made a lot of sense to me is because as a jazz musician, I wanted to know what the harmony was, right? And suddenly now it made sense to me. In the key of C, major or minor, doesn't matter whether it's C major or minor, it's just D7 flat 5. If you're wondering where the German and the Italian come in, they come in through the idea of rootless voicings. Rootless voicings are something that jazz musicians know about all the time. Music theory textbooks don't spend a lot of time talking about what a rootless voicing is. Again, this is another one of those things where I think music theory texts tend to swing and miss on. For example, every diminished triad is an incomplete dominant 7 chord. Okay, functionally. Okay, now of course you can have non-functional diminished triads. Every fully diminished 7th chord is a dominant 7 flat 9. Actually, there are 4 possible roots. Okay, and this is something that composers have known about for a long time, is the idea that the fully diminished 7th chord, as a symmetrical construction, actually every one of the tones is a leading tone and can go anywhere, which is actually one of the cool things about the chord. Okay, so if you extend the idea of a rootless voicing to that of the augmented 6th chord, that's where we get the German and Italian, because in the German and the Italian, the root is not present. It's still an altered dominant built on the supertonic. Here we have a 5/5, flat 5, and when we have the German, we get a flat 9. So basically it's a dominant 7 flat 9 chord with a flat 5. Take away the root, and we have a German augmented 6 chord. Take away the root and the flat 9, you have sort of an incomplete, the incomplete version of it, sort of voicing the most important tones, the 7th, the flat 5, and the 3rd, which are the most important tones to reflect the quality of the harmony, and that gives you the Italian augmented 6 chord. This is all D7, flat 9, flat 5 in all cases. Composers will, in the course of one passage, will often use multiple variations of voicings of this chord. For example, rocking back and forth between the French and the German version of this chord. In the French version, in the German version. And so it's just that half step. Root, flat 9, root, flat 9. Okay. You might wonder that this chord, the German augmented 6 chord, looks, smells, tastes a lot like a dominant 7th chord built on the flat 6th scale degree, or in major, or 6th scale degree in minor. Yeah, the German augmented 6 chord sounds like an A flat dominant 7 chord. Is it? Well, the answer to that question is yes and no. Because the spelling matters. In an augmented 6 chord, the F sharp is not spelled G flat. In an A flat dominant 7th chord, you've got A flat, C, E flat, G flat. In a augmented 6th chord, you're going to have that F sharp because that F sharp is the 3rd of the chord. The spelling actually tells you what the harmony is. And I don't know why music theory textbooks don't actually display, they just have to talk about it in some weird way. So, the next part of this is that A flat 7 does not equal D7 flat 5 flat 9. However, there is the same tritone. So in other words, a D7 chord contains the same tritone as an A flat dominant 7th chord. And I can probably demonstrate that if I put the keyboard up. So there's the D7. Okay, this tritone is also present here. Okay, it's the same tritone. And all tritones can resolve in or resolve out. It really just matters on the resolution of the chord. The interesting thing is that in the case of the augmented 6 chord, that tritone would lead us to G and not lead us to D flat. It sounds like a duck, but it doesn't look or act like a duck. Okay, so in other words, the sound of the chord is one thing, but how it looks and how it acts is yet another matter. Referring now to the Schubert, here we have the ending of this beautiful first movement. And what we have is kind of an ending that's a false ending. He does a 5/1 here, okay? But then we have basically an arpeggio over Neapolitan 6 chord, followed by this. And this chord here is our voicing of a 5. This is basically an E7 flat 5, okay? That's an E7 flat 5. It's actually an Italian spelling of it because, in fact, E is not in here. It's a rootless voicing. So, in fact, it's an Italian augmented sixth. But it's an Italian augmented sixth chord built on the fifth scale degree. So it's acting like a dominant, and then we go to tonic here. There's the Neapolitan to 5/7 flat 5 to tonic. All right. So yeah, so even Schubert treated the dominant flat 5 chord as a just straight up dominant. The augmented sixth chord is very easily explained as just a dominant flat 5. When I was teaching at the University of Tennessee, and the University of Tennessee has a good jazz program. And when I was teaching the augmented sixths, when I looked at the jazz players, I just said to them, hey, folks, this is just a dominant built on the supertonic. It's a dominant of the dominant built on the supertonic flat 5. And in the case of the German, it's a rootless voicing with a flat 9. And then they were like, oh, okay, cool. And I had to really explain it to the classical players who like were kind of thinking, what? But jazz players knew right away because I could just say D7 flat 5 flat 9, just give it a nice rootless voicing, and you've got the German, etc., etc. I'm curious if anybody's watching who's learned these things in different ways. Did you learn it the way that I'm presenting it, or did you learn it in some other way? Again, I hope everybody's doing okay. We'll talk to you soon. Take care, and bye-bye.